America, America, make God thy gold.
Welcome to Patriot Nightcap. Audience, hello folks, everybody. I'm excited right now to introduce author Jonah Schultz, author of the book Common Sense for a Dying Nation. Can't disagree. Former congressional candidate out of Cleveland, Ohio. It's very nice to meet you and talk to you, Jonah. Thank you for coming on my show.
Well, absolutely. The pleasure's mine.
Jonah, give me a little bit of your background right now. First of all, what inspired you to get into politics? What inspired you at such a young age to jump into politics? I'm curious.
Sure. Well, usually the first question I get is about my age. I'm 28 years old. Usually, especially while I was running for office, that was the first question that any audience member would ever have is, are you old enough to be in Congress? Was one of the questions. Can I see your ID? But I first got directly involved in politics at age 23. And I've always been very politically oriented. In high school, I started a young conservatives group that I took a lot of heat for. Even back in the day, a little bit of things were really heating up at that point, and I can only imagine being in our school system today, the things that we're seeing going on. But at age 23, I can remember distinctly sitting on my couch and watching the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. And it was in that moment that I really realized that this wasn't about Brett Kavanaugh, right? It wasn't about Donald Trump. It wasn't about any of the individuals that have, really had their lives ruined by the left as individuals. This is about going after and destroying any individual who dares step in the way of the authoritarian power grabs of this really great uniparty that we've seen come to power in the United States. And it wasn't with Brett Kavanaugh or anyone else. It wasn't about just keeping him off the bench or not letting him get into power. It was about destroying his life, destroying his children's lives. It was about discouraging and instilling fear into any individual who dared step up. So it was in those moments that I really realized we either step up now or we don't have a country left to fight for. This is our moment. No one's coming to rescue us. We have to be that SWAT team that breaks in at the 11th hour and saves this thing and turns it around, because we're not fighting for the next election or the next year. We're fighting to maintain liberty on this earth for the next 1,000 years. And then that's the way we really have to view ourselves as people, as this is our 1776, that we're trying to create a revolution in the minds and hearts of men the same way we did in 1776. So in that time, I started getting involved in politics on the local level, started working with candidates, volunteering on campaigns, started doing some policy advising, got on my county Republican Central Committee here in Cleveland, Ohio. And what I really then began to realize was how broken the Republican Party was, because, for my whole life, I was a registered independent. When I first registered at the age of 18, I had my issues with the Republican Party. But, my firm belief was, the Republican Party, it's the grand old party, right? This is who I need to get out there and support. And what I realized was so much of the GOP is content, certainly with the status quo, doesn't mind losing, and really has no interest in any kind of dynamic change that needs to take place within our federal, state, or local governments. And so that's why I personally decided to run for office. And I didn't have huge funding. I didn't have huge backers or endorsements, but I believed we needed to have this radical change in Congress led by these citizen candidates, constitutional conservatives who really believed it was their life mission to be a voice for the voiceless that we're seeing right now. And we talk a lot about the silent majority and the sleeping giant that is, all of these great patriots around America. And my message to all those people through the campaign and now is we can no longer afford to be the silent majority, right? At some point, the giant has to wake up if we're going to win this. And the hour is late. So, after the election, obviously I'm not in Congress now. So I obviously did not succeed in my endeavors, but I think we moved some things in a positive direction. I think I inspired my competition to take on some more conservative positions and hopefully ultimately govern more conservatively. But it was at that point that I wrote my book, Common Sense for a Dying Nation, which was released just recently in March. And you can really call it a cultural critique or a political commentary, but at its core, Common Sense for a Dying Nation is just a reassertion of basic facts that we once understood to be true as Americans. It's an assertion of our rights, where these rights come from, and how we ought to live our lives as free Americans. Are we creating a society that truly deserves to be free? Are we living virtuous lives the way God intended? And ultimately, I want to hold up a mirror to ourselves, myself included, and say, have I done all I can? Have I lived my life the right way? Am I embodying the true meaning of liberty? And so really bringing together the three battlefields we are on: the political battlefield, the cultural battlefield, and the spiritual battlefield. My book really digs into each of these issues in a very concise way, modeled after Thomas Paine's Common Sense from 1776. It's a short, concise read, just as Common Sense was in 1776. And I knew we didn't need another 500-page expose on healthcare or immigration policy, because the policy disputes themselves are very simple, right? Do you want to reduce illegal immigration? You close the border. Do you want to reduce inflation? You spend less. Do you want to reduce crime? You lock up more criminals, right? These are not complicated answers, and the average American can figure these things out.
Yeah.
And so my goal is, why are people asleep? Why are people choosing to live this way? And are we going to make that choice to be better and to awaken?
Okay, so let's talk about this, because as a mom, like, this really concerns me. Can I just read a couple of excerpts to you? This is from the American Family Association. Okay, the 2022 midterm elections saw the highest voter turnout among younger Americans, ages 18 to 29, in almost 30 years. However, this group split for leftist progressive candidates by an almost 2-to-1 margin. Exit polling from Tufts University found that this younger demographic was the only age group in which a strong majority supported so-called progressives. These young people are more likely to support socialist and big government policies, climate change narrative, LGBTQ movement, other extremely liberal ideologies. Also less likely to attend church, which is not surprising. According to the Barna Group, for example, the percentage of Gen Z, they identify as atheists. Now, let me read this to you. Gen Z does not assert a religious identity. They might be drawn to things spiritual, but with a vastly different starting point from previous generations, many of whom received a basic education on Bible and Christianity. The percentage of Gen Z that identifies as atheist is double that the US adult population. What has happened to our youth? What is going on? You know what I mean? I'm all for bringing prayer back into the school. I think we've gone so loony left now. I don't know is there any bringing this back?
Well, I think the thing we have to understand is there is no bringing this back without a spiritual revival within the United States.
Yes, I agree.
We can talk about politics all we want and the importance for great policy, but if that is not married with a revival in our souls, then there's really no great hope for our country. But that being said, the reason that this has happened among young people is, one, we've completely dissolved the family unit here in the United States. Obviously, the majority of children are now growing up in single parent homes or unmarried households. They're not getting any kind of foundation from the time that they're born. And even those that are growing up much of the time in childcare raised by strangers. By the time their parents get home from working all these long hours, their parents are too exhausted and they just throw an iPad in front of them.
Right.
So even those children
terrifying. That's a whole other thing, right? That's terrifying.
Right. And so what we've done is we've created this idea that we live in a secular society, we have a secular government. That couldn't be more divorced from the truth and the foundation of this country. Even Eric Adams, the radical left mayor of New York City, said that our religion, our faith, needs to advise our policy. Now, I would like to examine his faith a little bit if it's leading him to those conclusions. But the point is very true. We took religion out of every aspect of public life. And this is the result of that, because every individual, whether you're spiritual or religious or not, everybody worships something. You either worship what is true or you worship what is false. Human beings are innately religious creatures. And to add one more point to why those younger generations are going so far to the left is the one thing I will give them credit for is they do understand innately that there is something deeply wrong with society, with our country. But the Republicans have truly failed to provide a meaningful alternative, because for so long, the Republican Party of my lifetime has just become the Democrat Party of 5 to 10 years ago, right? We talk about spending or issues of economics, and the Democrats will propose a $3 trillion spending package, and the Republicans will say, no, that's irresponsible. We need to only spend $2.5 trillion. Or, the Democrats say, we need to trans the kids, and Republicans will say, well, as long as we wait until they're 13 or 14, or, there's no sense of there's no coherent vision for how we ought to live. So when these individuals who are deprived of their spirituality, don't have any kind of faith in a true God or a true religion, they latch on to that spiritual argument that the left has made on all of these issues. They make, regardless of how flawed their arguments are, they make them on the religious and spiritual level without exactly saying so, right? Their stances on abortion, their stances on transgenderism, their stances on all of these social issues are deeply, deeply spiritual, and and they continue to win. So Republicans need to take a little tip from that and say, listen, we shouldn't moderate ourselves into this Democrat-light party that then creates this void, this vacuum where individuals want a radical change to a broken society, and they just latch on to the Democrats who are providing some solution, even if it's insane. That's why I said about Bernie Sanders and the student loan issue was Republicans refuse to say this is an issue and provide a conservative solution for it. And all those individuals who are drowning in that debt, myself included, as far as drowning in the debt, so many of those individuals latched on to Bernie Sanders' plan because it was the only plan out there. So Republicans need to learn about these things and take notes.
That makes sense. Do you think the Democrats are just smarter when it comes to strategically pinpointing social media, like targeting the youth better than the Republicans? I feel like they're better at the social media aspect of it, and we have to accept that our kids are on social media.
Yeah, I mean, Democrats are definitely better at a lot of things, but it's also we also have to understand that so many of the establishment Republicans, those in power, really don't care if they lose, right? They don't really care the direction that this country is going in. So there's no real effort made. But the left has, over periods of decades, taken over every major institution in the United States. They own the government, they own the media, they own our medical system, they own, obviously, all of journalism, they own corporations, they own Wall Street. And that's been a methodical process that's taken place while conservatives were really just worried about, going to work and doing our own thing and not wanting to have to worry about those types of things, which I can sympathize with. But this is the result of that. And so when you take a look at, how can we combat these type of things, Republicans need to get serious and say, listen, we're not going to go out and build a platform that's going to take down Facebook, take down Twitter, take down Instagram, take down TikTok. But what we can do is actually legislate to prevent this getting in the hands of children, right? And we need to understand that when we have that power, when we have that authority to actually legislate, like we're seeing some good things happening in Florida and some other states every now and again, we need to use that authority that the people gave us. And what we've always seen is the Democrats take miles and miles of ground, and when Republicans win an election, we just stand still because we say, hey, we don't want the government to do anything. We're small government conservatives. But at a certain point, you're losing the ability to conserve anything. And that's where we are today.
So what are some of your guidelines? Like, what are some of your common sense ideas that we can implicate or, instill in our children, or even just every day at school? Like, what are some of your ideas? Your book, Common Sense for a Dying Nation. So at the local level, what can the average American start to do? I mean, I know, obviously, get involved, go to the meetings, I'm even thinking I'll have a meeting with my principal, my daughter's principal, just to talk about certain things. Like, are the bathrooms still going to be boys and girls? Like, I mean, I'm quite serious. It's sad, but I'm serious because I'm seeing the decimation of women's sports, the, women not having privacy in their bathrooms. Like, I can't believe that we're here right now.
Right.
But what does your book provide in terms of just some common sense? Like, what we can do at a local level, I guess, is my question. But my very long-winded question.
Right. Well, you know, we can talk about all the legislative solutions so we're blue in the face, right? Like I've said, so many of these are very obvious to us as far as what we can do within the government, the legislation that can be passed to address these issues. But really, everything we talk about is a moot point if there isn't some type of great awakening among the population. And you talk about going to groups, you talk about going to meetings. There's all of these amazing patriot groups across the country that I went and spoke at. But that's the 1% of the 1%. Those are the individuals attending those meetings in many cases where the vast majority of individuals are really unplugged from what is going on in this country. The perfect example I always use about the apathy in our country, especially on the Republican side, is I look at somebody like Mitch McConnell, right, who's been a U.S. Senator since 1985, and he only has a 20% approval rating. And he is the senator in deep red Kentucky, where you know those Republicans are, you know, MAGA Republicans. They're probably saying we want constitutional conservatives, we want outsiders. But every opportunity they get in a primary, they line up and they reelect Mitch McConnell in a landslide each and every time. He has never once faced a legitimate challenge in a primary or general election. So we have to understand that there's something broken about us, right? We can clamor for term limits, but we have the opportunity to term limit our representatives anytime we want. We can blame money, we can blame power, we can blame the corruption all we want, but we have the final say at the voting booth. So what we have done as a people is we've kind of shrugged off this responsibility that is an essential part of American life. You know, Thomas Jefferson said the cost of freedom is eternal vigilance. We've shrugged that off and kind of outsourced that to our politicians, to our political elite, and said, hey, if I get a few mailers here and there, that will really dictate who I'm going to vote for. If I see, if I see enough ads on Fox News or my local news at night, maybe I'll vote for that person. And they just, regurgitate a couple ostensibly conservative Republican talking points. So everything that I write about in my book really comes down to how we can awaken ourselves. I don't dig deep into policy because I think that doesn't even matter until we figure out why we can't get off our butts and do something about this and hold our politicians to a higher standard, because nothing will change until that happens. So that's step number one. And then ultimately we have to create a society that deserves to be free. We have to create a society that shares the same language. We have to create, and what I mean by that is not just English. I mean, we have to understand the words we use, shared common definitions of words. We can't be shifting the definition of words like man and woman, like recession, like the Biden administration likes to do, or the definition of vaccine that was changed by the CDC, right? A society that can't communicate. We have to get out of this age of my truth. We have to come to an understanding that there is a single moral center to the universe. And I might not always have the right answer. You might not always have the right answer, but there is always a right. There is always a wrong. And if you have a society that can't agree on even that fact, you're not going to have a society that ever comes together in any meaningful way politically to challenge that uniparty that has taken hold. And then ultimately, we have to realize as individuals that we're not just cogs in a great machine, that we have a unique and powerful purpose on this earth, that we were all each created by a divine authority who has given us a divine purpose, who has given us each mighty gifts to carry out that only we ourselves can carry out, because God could have put us in any time in any place in history, but he chose right here and right now, because each and every one of us has a unique ability to influence the trajectory of this world right here and now where nobody else could. And so it's coming together with the understanding of all of these very basic things that we once understood and relearning them again. And if we can understand these things, then we can get into policy and start really kicking some butt.
I love that, Jonah. Thank you for that. Was so inspiring, everything you just said. But the words that really ring for me is eternal vigilance, because I feel like I've been doing this for a couple of years now. And I'm like, when I first jumped into this, and I studied journalism in college, and, we just take it for granted. We're like, oh, freedom of speech. Of course, it's always going to be there. No, it's not. Not necessarily. Right. It's because I have had so many strikes on YouTube, probably just maybe for a couple of the words that you just used. You never know. You know what I mean? So It's like this is to me, I think this is terrifying, because it's for real. Like, if you don't have extreme vigilance and get up and fight for this, it can just be taken away so easily. So every day, if I do a show a week or something and I put it out there, and everyone, by the way, I did order your book. Because I said,
Thank you.
it's time for a really good refresher right now. I mean, I read Thomas Paine's Common Sense in college, and so I remember that. But I'm like, yes, common sense for the dying nation. We are. And also, what's your opinion on Tucker Carlson? Like a huge voice has just been muzzled. Well,
Yeah,
I'm
well,
sure he'll probably jump over to Newsmax. I pray to God, or
yeah,
his own Telegram channel.
yeah. I have no doubt Tucker Carlson has great things in his future. I think we can all be sure of that. But he was the one true voice of conservatism
Right.
on cable television, right, where the most people access their news. And he was the one person who went up against the narratives of the ruling establishment, even coming from the Republican Party, right? He was the one real
One
talking head.
voice.
He was the one person who went up and would question, why are we sending $200+ billion to Ukraine, right? When
Yeah.
we are just absolutely decimated here at home. He was the one person asking questions about what, we just all forgot about Jeffrey Epstein and these 911 calls.
Right.
He really kept
Right.
his foot on the gas constantly and asked questions that nobody else would. And I think that's ultimately the reason why Fox broke away from him, is because Fox is moving towards that more establishment GOP, just kind of moving the ball for those power players. And I think Tucker Carlson broke against that. But ultimately, I think God works in great ways. And I think somebody like Tucker Carlson, who's as talented and gifted, and I think one of the great truth tellers of our generation,
Yes.
I think there's
He'll,
potentially bigger things on the
yes,
horizon.
I agree. He's going to land on a higher platform. It's not like
Yeah.
he's going away. Pray to God.
Right.
But I was upset when Lou Dobbs was taken down. Did you like Lou Dobbs? I was like, what
Yeah, no,
happened to
I
Lou
liked
Dobbs?
it. But I can even go back as far. I remember when Fox News broke off with Glenn Beck, and regardless of people's thoughts on Glenn Beck, he was one of those individuals who dug deep into a lot of the issues that people didn't want to dig into. And so there is somewhat of a pattern here with the individuals who don't just kind of regurgitate those talking points.
Yes.
Don't seem to last forever on cable news. Certainly not on Fox News. If you're I mean, we saw Don Lemon go too, so there was one victory at least. He can,
Right.
I can say for him, there is nothing larger on the horizon for him. He's going to fade off into
Absolutely right.
obscurity
And
where
just
he
so
belongs.
disparaging to women. I mean, forget it. I can't
Yeah.
even think about that guy.
Right.
What's on the horizon for you? Like when are you running again? What are you doing? What are your plans?
Well, I always say I certainly don't have any plans of running right now. But what I always say is when God calls me to do something, I'll do it. And so I'm in a phase of life right now where I've been focused on the book. I've been focused on, trying to do some things here in the state of Ohio. We have a great House Bill 68. It's called the SAFE Act here in Ohio, which would ban puberty blockers, which would ban these sex reassignment surgeries for minors here in the state of Ohio. So we're working on some initiatives to help support that and get that through the Ohio State House, because again, if we have a Republican supermajority here in the state here in Ohio that doesn't like to act like a Republican supermajority, this is the bare minimum that needs to get done. So trying to help work on some legislative solutions to some of the problems that we're seeing here. But ultimately, what I saw in politics is it's so financially driven, and really you do need in the current battlefield, until people wake up, that money and that power, those huge power players are going to have a exorbitant amount of power and influence over the direction of elections and the outcomes. But once people wake up, then that power all goes away. And so that's really my goal right now through this book and through what I'm doing here in the state of Ohio, is to wake those people up and say, this is your country. This is your government. Start acting like it. Right. And take an increased sense of responsibility. And like you said, to triple down on it, eternal vigilance, right?
Yes.
It's not just I worked on a campaign, one election. It's not just I voted in a presidential election, or I watched, the news every 4 years. It's you have a country. The inherent state of man, or the natural state of mankind, is to throw away freedom, is to strip away freedom, and eternal vigilance fights against that.
I love it.
The state of mankind is slavery. is slavery, is poverty, it's despair. And America changed that for the first time. And so that is something that can go away and has gone away very quickly. And the next 10 years, the next 30 years are going to get very, very ugly, even worse, much, much worse than they are now, if we don't step up and really, really take it upon ourselves, be the change we want to see, be the voice, and ultimately hold those individuals who are in office to a higher account. And that's really going to be what dictates the course of this country.
100%. Thank you. Jonah, listen, I applaud you for your passion and your eternal vigilance. We need you. We really need you. So please run again and stay vigilant, and I will do the same. And I really think that's our message today for our audience, you know, like stay vigilant, get involved at a local level. Don't just sit back and let our beautiful country slip through our fingers and everything that we've fought before, you know, we have to fight for it. So where do we find you again? Tell my audience where we find you.
So JonahDSchultz.com you can go to if you'd like to learn more about me. If you'd like to read the book, Common Sense for a Dying Nation, it's available on Amazon. It's available on Barnes & Noble. You can find me on Facebook at Jonah Schultz as well. So check out. So you could find me on YouTube, Twitter, all those places. You know, got some good videos and different things out there if you want to watch some old campaign clips as well.
Yes, where are you on YouTube?
If you just go ahead on YouTube and type in Jonah Schultz, you'll find some campaign clips. You'll find some things that I've worked on in the past as well. And you know, we'll see what the future holds with all of that. But I would say first and foremost, check out Common Sense for a Dying Nation. It's a quick, concise 75-page read. You can knock it out in 2 hours. Share it with your friends, your neighbors, those individuals who might be on the fence. It's not an intimidating read and something that's easily digestible for everyone across the political spectrum. And I think it's a very important read right now.
It is. It is a very important read right now. I ordered it. Everybody order it. Thank you, Jonah. Thank you for coming on. And I will share this with my audience. God bless you. Thank you for being a fire-breathing patriot. So nice to meet you. God bless. Okay.
Thank you, Tricia. God bless.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And mercy more than